All right, so today we're diving into a real classic, North by Northwest.
A classic indeed.
And I know what you might be thinking, right? Crop duster. Cary Grant. Seen it.
Right.
But trust me, folks, this movie, it's like a perfectly tailored suit. It's sharp, it's timeless, and it's hiding all sorts of cool details that you don't notice on the first glance.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking mistaken identity gone wild, suspense that'll have you chewing your fingernails.
Oh, for sure.
And of course, Hitchcock's legendary cameos. And get this, some even call it the first James Bond film.
Interesting.
It's true. So, to really appreciate the depth of this film, we kind of have to talk about the man behind the camera for a sec.
Of course, of course. Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense. I mean, his career was incredible. We're talking decades of filmmaking, from those silent films to the golden age of Hollywood. He practically invented the thriller genre as we know it.
He really did.
But more than that, Hitchcock understood how our minds work.
Yeah.
He knew how to tap into our deepest fears, how to make us feel vulnerable, even when we're safe and sound, at home watching a movie.
Exactly. And he does that brilliantly with our protagonist, Roger Thornhill. Played with that, that signature Cary Grant charm. Thornhill's an ordinary guy, an advertising executive, living a pretty comfortable life, and then, mistaken identity. Throws him headfirst into this world of spies and assassins.
Yeah.
Talk about your worst nightmare, right?
Absolutely. And that's the genius of Hitchcock, right?
Oh.
He takes an everyday situation, something we can all relate to, and twists it into something terrifying. You're watching Thornhill, but you're also putting yourself in his shoes thinking, what if that were me?
Right. And Cary Grant just nails that feeling of, wait, this can't be happening to me.
Right.
He's sophisticated, he's quick-witted, but you also see the panic in his eyes, as he realizes just how deep this rabbit hole goes.
Yeah, this theme of mistaken identity, this wasn't just a plot device for Hitchcock. It was a reflection, really, I think, of his own anxieties, his fascination with the duality of human nature.
Right.
He loved to explore the idea that things aren't always what they seem, that anyone could be hiding something.
Oh, for sure. And speaking of things not being what they seem, can we talk about that crop duster scene?
Oh,
I mean, that's Hitchcock at his suspenseful best.
one of the best.
Picture this.
Yeah.
You're Cary Grant, standing in the middle of nowhere, this vast, empty landscape stretching out around you.
Yeah.
And then out of the silence, you hear the drone of a plane. But it's not just any plane, it's a crop duster. And it's coming right for you.
Oh, man.
Talk about suspense.
That scene is a masterclass in building tension. Hitchcock uses these long, drawn-out shots showing the vastness of that landscape and really just emphasizing how exposed and vulnerable Thornhill is.
Totally.
And he lets the silence stretch, broken only by the growing roar of that plane's engine. You're practically holding your breath, along with Thornhill, just waiting for the inevitable.
Oh, absolutely. And just when you think things can't get any more intense, we get to the climax of the film on Mount Rushmore. What a setting, right?
Oh, yeah. The choice of location, brilliant. Those massive stoic faces of presidents looking down on this desperate chase. It's a visual metaphor, right?
Yeah.
You have Thornhill, this average guy, caught in this battle against forces that seem much larger than himself.
It's such an iconic scene, and it's been referenced and imitated in so many films since then.
Sure.
I mean, come on. Who doesn't love a good Mount Rushmore showdown?
That's right.
But before we get too sidetracked by, iconic imagery, let's dig into some of the behind-the-scenes secrets that make North by Northwest even more fascinating. You ready for some trivia?
Always. Always up for a little movie magic.
Okay, so we all know Cary Grant absolutely embodies the role of Roger Thornhill, right?
Well, absolutely.
But here's something interesting. When Grant first read the script, he was completely thrown. He couldn't quite grasp who his character was or what was truly motivating, the plot.
That's surprising. You never know it from his performance.
Right, and here's the kicker. Hitchcock used that to his advantage.
Really?
Grant's initial confusion actually helped him portray Thornhill's, growing bewilderment and frustration as he's being pursued by these mysterious forces.
Oh, wow.
It added this extra layer of authenticity to his performance.
That's classic Hitchcock, right? Using everything at his disposal, even an actor's initial uncertainty, to actually enhance the story. It just speaks volumes about his understanding of the craft and his ability to draw out the best from his actors.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of Hitchcock's craftiness, you can't forget his infamous cameos.
Of course not. How could we?
And yes, he's in this one too. I won't spoil it for you, but keep your eyes peeled at the beginning of the film around a certain bus stop.
Oh, very nice. Well, his playfulness, his willingness to break that fourth wall, it adds a whole other layer to his films, doesn't it? It's like he's winking at the audience, letting us in on the joke.
Absolutely. And speaking of playfulness, Hitchcock was notorious for his on-set antics and his determination to get the shot no matter what.
Oh, I can imagine. The story about the hidden cameras during the United Nations scenes always comes to mind.
Oh, you're going to love this. So Hitchcock really wanted to film inside the actual United Nations building for those scenes, right?
Yeah.
But they had these strict rules against filming. But did that stop Hitchcock?
I have a feeling I know the answer to this.
Not a chance.
Mm-hmm.
He came up with this elaborate plan. He staged this seemingly ordinary scene of Cary Grant walking through the lobby, blending in with the crowd.
Okay.
But here's the genius part. He had his crew hide cameras in strategic spots throughout the lobby, capturing Grant's movements without anyone being the wiser.
Oh, clever.
Sneaky, but I kind of admire it.
A master of illusion both on and off the screen. And it's that dedication to his craft that resulted in such groundbreaking filmmaking.
Exactly. Okay, one last tidbit before we move on. You know how James Stewart was practically Hitchcock's go-to leading man?
Right.
Well, apparently Stewart really wanted to play Roger Thornhill.
Oh, wow. Can you imagine?
Right. But Hitchcock had his heart set on Cary Grant for this role. He actually delayed production to accommodate Grant's schedule.
Wow. That speaks volumes about his vision for North by Northwest, doesn't it? He knew exactly what he wanted, and he was willing to wait for that perfect actor to bring it to life.
He really did.
And I think we can all agree he certainly made the right call.
100%. And that perfect casting choice leads us to a fascinating question. Is North by Northwest actually a kind of blueprint for the James Bond films?
Ooh, now that you mention it, there are some striking similarities, aren't there?
Our sources mention that some film buffs even call it the first James Bond film. And when you really break it down, the DNA is definitely there. A charming, resourceful protagonist thrust into a world of espionage.
The glamorous settings, that blend of action and suspense, that dry wit.
Oh, and we can't forget the femme fatale. Eva Marie Saint is Eve Kendall. She is every bit as alluring and enigmatic as any Bond girl.
While it's unlikely that Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond, directly lifted from North by Northwest, there's no denying the film shares some key elements that would later define the Bond formula.
Right.
In fact, the producers of the Bond films have even acknowledged borrowing a specific scene for From Russia with Love.
Now you've got me curious. Which scene?
I'm afraid I'll have to leave that for you to discover. Sometimes the thrill is in the chase, wouldn't you agree?
Okay. All right, you've definitely piqued my curiosity. I guess I'll have to rewatch From Russia with Love with a keener eye.
There you go.
But for now, let's bring it back to North by Northwest.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground here, the iconic scenes, the behind-the-scenes trivia, Hitchcock's legacy, even a little James Bond comparison thrown in for a good measure.
Of course, why not?
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to revisit a few key points and see what really stood out to you.
Sounds good. I'm ready when you are.
So, thinking back to those iconic scenes we talked about, the crop duster, Mount Rushmore, what makes them stick with you? Is it the sheer audacity of it all, or is there something more at play?
It's that Hitchcockian blend of suspense and visual storytelling. He doesn't just tell you a story, he makes you feel it. Those wide open spaces in the crop duster scene, those aren't just pretty backdrops, they're tools to make you feel Thornhill's isolation. His vulnerability.
It's like he's playing with our expectations, right?
Right.
You think chase scene, you picture like narrow alleys, speeding cars.
Sure.
Not this vast emptiness where there's literally nowhere to hide.
Exactly. And then you have Mount Rushmore, right? Those imposing figures of history overlooking this very human drama. It elevates the stakes. It makes it clear that Thornhill isn't just running from bad guys. He's caught in something much bigger than himself.
And yet, through it all, Hitchcock never loses sight of the human element.
Right.
We're invested in Thornhill's fate even when the world around him feels as big and indifferent as Mount Rushmore. What about the behind-the-scenes stuff? Anything surprise you there?
The hidden cameras at the UN, that's a story for the ages, isn't it? I mean, talk about dedication to your vision. It speaks to his resourcefulness as a filmmaker, his willingness to bend the rules to get that shot he needed.
Right. I mean, it's a little bit sneaky, but you gotta admire his ingenuity. It also made me think about those stories of Hitchcock practically torturing his actors, like handcuffing them together just to see how they'd react.
He definitely had his unorthodox methods, but you can't argue with the results, right?
True, and it's not just the technical aspects, but his casting choices.
Right.
I mean, James Stewart desperately wanted to play Thornhill, which is wild to think about.
Stewart would have brought his own charm to the role, but there's like a certain debonair quality to Cary Grant that's essential for Thornhill.
Yeah.
It's what makes him so believable as this advertising executive who suddenly finds himself in over his head.
Totally. Grant walks that line between, like, sophistication and vulnerability so well.
Mm-hmm.
But this whole conversation about casting and style
Yep.
brings us back to that proto-Bond idea, right?
Right.
Did North by Northwest lay the groundwork for James Bond? Or is that just, like, a fun bit of trivia?
It's more nuanced than just a direct influence, It's about recognizing those shared threads, right?
Right.
The charming, capable protagonist.
Yeah.
The globe-trotting adventures, that blend of action and humor. These elements were already swirling around in the cinematic ether, and Hitchcock brought them together in a way that felt fresh and exciting.
And North by Northwest does it with such style.
Oh, yeah.
The suits, the cocktails, those sweeping shots of exotic locations. It all feels very Bond-esque.
Yeah, absolutely. Even the femme fatale, Eva Marie Saint as Eve Kendall, she embodies that classic mix of allure and danger that we've come to expect from Bond girls. But here's the key difference. Hitchcock never loses sight of the psychological underpinnings of his characters.
Right.
They're not just archetypes, right? They're flawed, complex individuals caught in these extraordinary circumstances.
That's a great point. Even with all the thrills and, like, the glamorous trappings, there's a depth to North by Northwest that sets it apart. So we've talked about the suspense, the visuals, the Bond connection, but what about those, like, deeper themes Hitchcock is known for? How do they play out in this film?
That's what makes it such a rich text, On the surface, you have this very gripping thriller, but underneath, it's really a meditation on identity, perception, and that very fine line between guilt and innocence. Take the recurring motif of, mistaken identity, for example.
Which isn't just about Thornhill being in the wrong place at the wrong time, right?
Right.
It speaks to something deeper, about how easily our perceptions can be manipulated, how fragile our sense of self can be.
Precisely. Thornhill's entire world is turned upside down because someone, somewhere, has misidentified him. He's forced to question everything he thought he knew about himself and the world around him.
And that's something we can all relate to, even if we've never been chased by a crop duster. It's that feeling of being lost in a system, of being labeled and judged based on appearances rather than who we truly are.
And then there's the theme of guilt and innocence, right? Throughout the film, Thornhill is pursued not only by the villains, but also by the authorities who believe he's committed this crime he didn't commit. Right.
He's
forced to prove his innocence while simultaneously trying to uncover the truth about this conspiracy he's stumbled upon.
It's that classic Hitchcockian scenario.
Yeah.
The wrong man accused, caught in this web of intrigue he doesn't fully understand. But what I find interesting is how North by Northwest flips the script on, like the traditional hero narrative.
How so?
Well, Thornhill doesn't start out as this, like, righteous, morally upstanding guy. He's a bit of a cad, a slick advertising executive, more concerned with his next martini than with saving the world.
That's true. He's initially more concerned with protecting his carefully constructed image than with doing what's right. It's only through being thrust into this extraordinary situation that he's forced to confront his own flaws and ultimately rise to the occasion.
Exactly. He's not a hero because he's, like, inherently good. He's a hero because he chooses to be, even when it terrifies him.
Right.
And that transformation, that journey from self-preservation to selflessness, that's what makes his character so compelling.
It's a reminder that heroism isn't about being fearless. It's about overcoming your fears and doing what needs to be done, even when it's difficult.
I love that.
Yeah.
And speaking of overcoming fears, let's talk about the role of women in North by Northwest. Hitchcock's portrayal of female characters is often a topic of debate.
That's putting it mildly.
Right. But in North by Northwest, we see a bit of a departure from his typical, damsel in distress trope. I mean, Eva Marie Saint's character, Eve Kendall, is a force to be reckoned with. She's smart, she's resourceful, and she's not afraid to use her, her sexuality to get what she wants. But is she a villain? A victim? Or something in between?
That's the beauty of her character, isn't it? She keeps us guessing. On the one hand, she's clearly involved in this, this dangerous world of espionage. But on the other, we sense this vulnerability, this hidden agenda that makes us question her true allegiances.
Right.
We're never really sure where she stands.
And let's not forget that iconic dress she wears throughout most of the film.
Oh, right. that sleek gray suit perfectly tailored to her figure. It's both alluring and powerful. It's as if she's using her femininity as armor, a way to navigate a world that's, dominated by men.
It's such a departure from those, like, frilly, helpless female characters we often see in Hitchcock's other films.
Yeah.
Eve Kendall is a reminder that women can be just as complex, just as capable, and just as dangerous as their male counterparts.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, she ultimately plays a pivotal role in Thornhill's transformation.
Right.
It's through his relationship with her that he learns to see beyond his own self-interest and really fight for something larger than himself.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from those iconic scenes to, like, those hidden themes. But before we let you go, I want to circle back to that question we posed earlier. How would North by Northwest be different if it were made today?
Oh, that's an intriguing thought experiment. On the one hand, those core themes of mistaken identity and paranoia and that fragility of truth, it feels more relevant than ever in our current climate of social media and surveillance and fake news.
Right. It's like Hitchcock tapped into something timeless about the human condition, something that resonates even more strongly in our, like, increasingly complex world.
Absolutely. Imagine Thornhill's journey playing out in the age of smartphones and, facial recognition technology.
Oh, wow.
The possibilities for suspense, for misdirection, for exploring that idea of a digital footprint leading to mistaken identity, I mean, they're endless.
And can you imagine that crop duster scene being filmed today?
Oh my gosh.
The drone shots alone would be insane. But beyond, like, those technical advancements, I think the biggest difference would be in the pacing. Well, North by Northwest is a masterclass in slow burn suspense.
Right.
Hitchcock takes his time. He lets the tension build gradually, teasing out the reveals. It's a different kind of thrill ride than what we're used to today with our quick cuts and constant action sequences.
That's true, but I think there's still an appetite for that kind of elegant, suspenseful storytelling.
Oh, for sure.
Just look at the success of films like Parasite or Knives Out.
Great examples.
They prove that audiences are still drawn to those well-crafted mysteries that keep them guessing until the very end.
Absolutely. And I think a modern-day North by Northwest could still capture that magic, that feeling of being swept up in a world of intrigue and danger.
For sure, for sure. Perhaps the biggest question is who would play Thornhill. It would take an actor with that same charisma, that ability to be both charming and vulnerable, to pull off such an iconic role.
Now, that's a casting call I'd love to be a fly on the wall for. But for now, I think we've done North by Northwest justice.
Absolutely. We explored the iconic scenes, the behind-the-scenes secrets, the timeless themes, even pondered its influence on, the spy genre.
Well, we've also hopefully given you, our listener, a whole new appreciation for this cinematic masterpiece.
And perhaps even inspired you to revisit it with fresh eyes.
Yes.
Noticing all those nuances and layers that you might have missed before.
And who knows, maybe you'll even spot Hitchcock's cameo on your next viewing.
There you go. Until next time, keep diving deeper into the films that captivate your imagination. You never know what hidden treasures you might uncover.